Well, hello everyone. We're back in Kazakhstan, day 13. We're going to KKK Industries. They basically extrude structural concrete beams and they make all kinds of cool concrete products. The plant is owned by the BI Group, or they're partial owners of it. It's a new holding for them. And they need to learn lean. Now, the plant is 3 years old. It was built by a German company, German technology, but it's in desperate need of lean practices. So we're going to take a look at some stuff right off the bat. They're taking the form boards off of a big, huge concrete panel that's been built, and immediately you notice a tremendous amount of motion transportation just to relieve all these clamps and put them back in the rack. So the most obvious thing is the racks need to be on wheels, and they need to be right next to the forms so that as they take them off, they can just put them on the rack and continue to roll back and forth. But because, again, people are not aware of the difference between value and non-value added activity, they perform and do things like this. And it looks pretty silly when it's sped up. Could you imagine how painful it is to watch it in slow motion? It's crazy the amount of waste. Now, it took them over 40 minutes to strip this form and do all this, and it was painful for me to watch, to be completely honest with you. It should have been done maybe in 10 minutes. I think if I spent a day or two on it, we could get it down to 10 minutes. If you gave me a couple weeks, I think we could do the whole thing in 5 minutes. There's so many applications for lean here, it's almost staggering. So first of all, they're working very, very hard to get these form boards off. First, they had to transport all those clamps back over to those racks, and now they have to pry all this off, and then you see they've got all these foam or styrofoam inserts there, and they have to pop them all out. All this should be made out of polyethylene, little polyethylene blocks with little slots in them that these pry bars go in, and the whole thing just pop out. They could be reused. The concrete wouldn't stick to them. Very simple process to improve this. And so then to pop the form boards off, they're having to chisel in there really hard. They could add a little pocket on these form boards right on the front face, on the top edge. They stick the pry bar in and just pop them loose in a second. And then later on, you're going to see them carry these form boards all over the place. They need to be dropped down directly below the mold, if you will, right here, because they're going to reform it all up as soon as they finish this, and they end up carrying it back and forth multiple times. So the amount of transportation was almost staggering. And then the next thing is they have tons of debris that falls on the floor when they're stripping the forms. You can see it all right there. And if they had a little lip on this big blue beam here, it would catch all the debris and they could sweep it all up in one fell swoop, and it would be very simple. But instead they're working in all this debris. It would make it difficult to roll a cart all over the place, obviously, because of all the debris. And then in addition to that, the waste stream just goes on and on and on. It's almost crazy to watch this, what they have to do. 40 minutes to strip this thing. Man, it should have just popped apart in no time. So we got lots of room for improvement here, and we're going to start working on those kinds of improvements as we go along. Okay, so now what happens is this gets transferred to the next station, and they put a hoist on it overhead, and they pull the panels off the form board, and then they stack them up. So that's the last part of the process. Okay, so now that we're done with stripping the parts off of the mold, now we're going to take a look back at the form boards and the massive amount of transportation that's going to go on here. So this mold that we looked at before has been shifted over to the left side, and they continue to strip it off. This guy's got a little white bucket. He's going around picking up all this styrofoam. It's just a nightmare. And now they're going to start taking the form boards that they just removed and carrying it back over to where they first had them. It's the craziest thing. They could have dropped them down right below them and then transferred the whole thing back. I have no idea what these people were thinking on this one, but that's okay. They need to learn lean. They need to understand the basic concepts, that we don't want to have a bunch of motion and transportation and over processing, but they're doing it in spades here, and you can see how painful it is for me to watch this. But that's how you learn, and the first thing we want to do in any lean project is we want to go and watch. We want to see what's really going on. And so there you have it. They're carrying them back and forth where they just brought them from. It's nuts, absolutely nuts. Okay, so I cut all the form thing out because it's just too much to watch it all. Now, believe it or not, they're taking the clamps back that they just put on the rack, and they're taking them back to where they took them from. It's like, what? They could have dropped them down below the workbench. They could have rolled the racks back over there. There's so many options, but they're walking back and forth again to get the very clamps they just used. And so you can see how this thing shuttles across from side to side. So as you can see, lots of motion, and we need to reduce all of that. And there's the shuttle that comes back and forth and takes it, and that's how the system works. Okay, so this is what I was talking about. You see all the debris? If they just put a little lip on the side of this thing that kind of canted out at a 45-degree angle, it would catch all the debris that comes off the top of the forms, and they wouldn't have all that stuff all over the floor, and it would be very easy to contain it. But because they don't do that, now this guy goes along and sweeps it all with a broom and knocks everything all over the floor. It's very difficult. It'd take a second to sweep it all into the little tray, and then it has it all captured, and they wouldn't have to do this, but there's just a ton of over-processing everywhere you go on this. Then I came over to this guy, and he's stripping these form boards off, and he's bending over and killing himself to pull these things out, every one of them. I'm thinking, wow, a simple lever, he could not even have to bend over. He'd loosen these things up, and then they would easily break out because they have a lever, but he's struggling like crazy to break every one of these loose. So a lot of effort goes into this. I often think to myself, man, if I was doing this job all day long and we made it a lot less of a burden, I'd have a lot more energy to work for my employer and get work done. But this guy's just killing himself. Now here's another classic example of over-processing. This concrete has gone into this little pocket. Instead of filling the pocket so the concrete doesn't go in there and wasting the concrete, now he has to chip it all out, and it's a ton of work to do that. Okay, now we're going to go over to the rebar area where they actually tie the rebar for the reinforced steel that goes into every one of these panels. And these gals are doing actually really good right this minute. They've got a nice working height. They're not bending over. Everything looks pretty good. But as we watch it a little more, we realize they've got two teams right here that are tying rebar, and they've got the stack over here. So when that team over here, this lady right here, when they finish tying, they got to carry it all the way over there instead of putting the pile for both of them right between the two of them and setting up. And now they're picking up all this stuff off the floor. It should be hanging on these A-frames that are set up, but instead they're constantly bending over and picking the stuff off the floor. So there's definitely some improvements that can be made here. Okay, some real obvious things. The tape measure's down on the floor with the chalk. It should be in a workstation right up high so they don't have to bend over all the time to use it. The gals are constantly bending over back and forth, and their work area really needs some 3S'ing. It's really quite messy, and they're working a little harder than they need to work, but they're doing the best they can, and we're going to show them how to lean out these processes. So the goal is we're going to come back in 2 months. We taught them some principles. We definitely want them to work on 3S'ing their areas, and then once they get that taken care of, we're going to try to reduce some of this motion. But we gave them the basics. This gives us an overview of basically a standard. It gives us a point of reference on where we're starting from, and we'll see what happens in October when we come back. Okay, so now we're going to go on to 3S'ing. So I just walked around the whole facility and just took pictures of everything, and it was just pretty much chaotic everywhere I went. So they really haven't learned the practice of 3S'ing, making sure everything's clean, organized, well-maintained, preventive maintenance, and things like that. So here's the challenge that we gave to them. We want them not to really do too many lean things because it might be overwhelming to them because this is so foreign. So he said, listen, just spend a half hour every day with your 50 people before you start work and start cleaning. Just clean everything, and if it feels good, continue to do it. Now, we're giving them a 30-day challenge, 3S'ing every day for a half hour before you work, and then work. And let's see what happens. So I've challenged Aspan and Anton, the two leaders of the company, to make this happen, and they accepted the challenge. We're going to contact them every day on the chat, on the WhatsApp chat. They're going to send us pictures of the 3S'ing activity, and then we'll come back in October and we'll see what the transformation looks like. I think we have the potential to see some really cool stuff, and I think it's going to make the life of the worker so much better than what the current situation is. So this is the whole point. We've got a current standard. We've got a current state. We're going to look at that, and then we're going to watch everything unfold as they make this happen at KKK Industries in Kazakhstan. We'll see you in October.